The series starts eons ago in the Polaris galaxy, when a race of bioenergy creatures with the ability to manipulate time called the Zoni arrived from their dimension to Ratchet and Clank's universe. I'll mention this again later, but the words dimension and universe pretty much mean the same thing in this series. Because of their time abilities, a race called the Fongoids worshipped the Zoni, and the Zoni were so touched by this that they gave the Fongoids the power of time travel, and likely the ability to harness Zoni bioenergy, in hopes it would enrich their lives like it did, theirs, which did lead to the Fongoids having a very advanced society. Unfortunately, 3,000 years later the Fongoids wore the space-time continuum, so thin that it caused a tear in it that would have destroyed all of existence, but luckily Orvis, the leader and smartest of the Zoni, knew what to do and built the Great Clock, a device at the center of the universe, give or take 50 feet, which is an actual canon fact, that would fix the rift and maintain the flow, the time with Orevs and the Zoni keeping watch and fixing any temporal damage that would happen. Because of their actions, the Fongoids gave up all technology and lived as tribal communities to make amends for their actions. The Zoni would still be active though, as one example is that at some point, Orvis would meet and recruit a robot named Sigmund as junior caretaker of the Great Clock, where they would become close friends. Another result of the tear in space-time was that it weakened the barriers to the RNC universe, allowing rifts to open to another dimension called the Netherverse, home to another bioenergy race called the Nethers. Though hostile, the Nethers couldn't survive outside their dimension with the exception of small Nethers, and when they did, they gave the impression of being ghost, which made places seem like they are haunted, but more on them much later. Many eons passed till we get to an important part of Polaris and the series, history, when the galaxy became threatened by the Kragmites, an insectoid-like militaristic species, whose empire would travel across the universe conquering planets, for their personal gain, exterminating entire races along the way. It is likely around this time, a Kragmite named Begog would crash on planet Turnix, home to another hostile bio-energy race called the Loki, but he was eventually able to escape and destroyed the planet, thinking he destroyed the Loki, but sadly the race survived on the planet's remains, that floated in space. After a period of time, the fragments would land on planet Magus, where the Loki's unique biology allowed them to possess the small creatures of the planet and live alongside the local turtle-like species called the Tharpods, who had a connection to nature and the creatures that lived on the planet. One day Tharpod scientists Drive, Croyd and Nevo Binklemeyer, who were studying this bond, discovered a strange energy within Drive, Croyd's pet Mr. Dinkles, and decided to use Croyd's energy extracting device to study it tomorrow, but unknown to them, the energy was really the Loki's leader called the Loki Master, who realized such as device could allow him to extract and transfer Loki conciseness into more powerful creatures and decided to take it, almost being stopped by Nevo, but the Loki was able to make him work for him by taking the energy device and building robots to start the Loki Master's 100-year-long plan. Decades passed as while the Loki was working, Drive, Croyd thought Nevo took the device and Mr. Dinkles and was trying to find Mr. Dinkles, leading to him creating a device, called Ephemeris, to do so, but the Loki realized it could be useful and thus made Nevo, again making it look like he was behind it, to Croyd, reprogram and modify it to collect the universe's most dangerous creatures. Realizing what he did, Drive, Croyd tried to warn the other Tharpods, but by then it was too late, as the Loki's robot army started taking over the planet to convert it into habitats for the creatures, but Drive, Croyd would escape and study what is going on, going a bit crazy in the process. Back with the Kragmites, they were still focused on taking over Polaris, which would have been doomed if it wasn't for the Lombaxes. The Lombaxes, if you didn't know by now, are a feline-like race that were skillful engineers which allowed them to fight back against the Kragmites, leading to the Great War. It's likely that during the war, one Lombax named Caden would become best friends with another Lombax called Alistair Azimuth, and these two will have a big role later on, but I thought I'd bring it up now. While the two races were fighting at a stalemate, the Lombaxes came up with an idea to stop the Kragmites once and for all, and with the help of the 8 greatest minds at the Center for Advanced Lombax Research, they were able to create the Dimensionator, a device that can open portals to other dimensions/universes. They needed someone to use it though, and set up a training center on Sargasso, and I personally think Caden was the one who was trained to become not only the keeper of the Dimensionator, but also likely the one to banish all the Kragmites to another dimension. With Polaris safe, things calmed down a bit, and it seemed the Lombaxes would study other dimensions during this time, until one day, Lombax miners found a frozen Kragmite egg on Creely Comet, and the Lombaxes decided to raise the Kragmite, naming him Percival Tashian. Though not much is known about his past, at some point in his youth Tashin discovered his heritage and vowed revenge on the Lombaxes and started by building an army of robots to go find materials for his army. When he was done with the robots, Tashin banished them, but the robots, realizing they were free, decided to keep doing what they did, and became space pirates that would lay siege across Polaris. This, along with the other dangerous races of Polaris, likely made the Lombaxes realize that something needed to be done to keep the galaxy safe, and during a meeting Tashin spoke up and explained his plan, but he needed the Lombaxes' technology in order to do it. While the Lombaxes were getting suspicious of Tashin, including Caden, Alistair Azimuth thought it was the right thing to do, so he as elder councilman of the Center for Advanced Lombax Research gave Tashin the tech. As of Rift Apart, it sounds like Caden and the Lombax Council got nervous of what Tashin could do with this tech, so with their permission, Caden convinced a Lombax named Mags to map out all the dimensions in the name of science, but in reality it was so that they can find a place for the Lombaxes to go to in case something bad happened, which was a good idea, as a little over a year later Tashin attacked with his hired army of Drophides, a sentient fish species, on Fastoon. During the attack, the remaining Lombaxes met up at the court of Azimuth, where they used the Dimensionator to escape, except for Azimuth, who was forbidden from joining them since he caused all of this to begin with, and Caden, who stayed behind to save his wife and son along with keeping the Dimensionator safe. Though Caden couldn't save his wife, he was able to save his son, but realizing that he was no longer safe in Polaris, Caden sent him to the Solana galaxy while he stayed behind to keep the Dimensionator safe, while likely making sure Tashin couldn't make another one or where the Lombaxes went. At some point he crashed on a planet and met the smuggler, where he sold him a gyrocycle, likely for money to hide/escape. Sadly, Tashin would catch up to him and kill him, leaving only Azimuth, a female Lombax who I will get to later, and Caden's son left.